Three, two, one. Separate the art from the artist, and the podcaster from the podcast, or else you'll become a robot. TAR 2022. Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Taylor, and welcome to the 112th episode of Thursdays Tuesdays with Moire. It took a while for this episode to get out, but it's one my friend Devin has recommended and has been looking forward to for a very long time. As a matter of fact, I'm going to let my co host introduce himself.
Howdy, my name's Devin. Been a guy in the show since day one, really. Um, this is one of those things we started off as a pandemic project when we were all film students with no outlet for a while. And man, it's crazy just how long we've been at this thing. Um, just persisting forward by any means necessary. Um, yeah, I'm really looking forward to this episode. This was just an idea that I had covering these classical, music films. I've been a student of music for as long as I can remember. Um, I didn't always have an interest with classical music growing up, but I always heard like bits of it here and there, thanks to music that my grandparents and my parents would play over the years. Um, my grandpa especially had an extensive collection of classical music on vinyl, and he would always blare the stuff. He would blast Amadeus, Mozart, and Beethoven growing up. In fact, I think he gave himself tinnitus from doing so, and my uncle gave himself tinnitus from blasting Van Halen in the next room.
At 8 in the morning, yeah.
They'd fight with their different music tastes growing up apparently, and my mom had to endure that. Just like one room blasting Van Halen, the other room blasting Mozart, and both of them gave themselves permanent ringing in the ears from that. Um, I grew
All
up
very
with
powerful.
oh yeah, where I got into music and I learned how to use earplugs early on because of that. So I've been pretty protective of my hearing anytime I go to loud shows. But I've always been fascinated with rock music. I picked up an instrument finally when I was in like grade school. I picked up trombone first actually, but once I started with that and got the confidence with, oh, this music thing is actually kind of easy, then I finally had enough confidence to pick up guitar and got into metal music and eventually learned some classical stuff as well. I think it was Randy Rhoads and some of his um, recordings that he did with Ozzy Osbourne that really turned me on to classical and other forms of music. And yeah, I just love this stuff. So I can't wait to get in tonight and talk about these films all about music. This really brings me back to my high school days when I was learning like music full time. And
Oh yeah.
hell yeah.
All right.
But anyway, we got a few guests tonight. Julia, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello. My name is Julia. This is my second time on the podcast. It's a pleasure being back. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Or
I think
you're welcome.
the first time was I think last year when we did the Godfather trilogy.
Yes. Yeah, I was very excited for that, and I still think back fondly on that too.
That was a great
Yeah, no,
episode.
that was
Yeah.
that was a good time. It's funny because that was the first time I got COVID, and I'm just getting over the second time having it. So
Hey.
it's
the
all coming
irony.
back full circle. But no, that was a fun episode. I feel
It's
like that's
all
where
coming back to me.
Me.
yeah, but so Julia, so what's your kind of interest or background with like music or classical music
So
specifically?
I was never. My family. We don't really have music backgrounds.
Fair enough.
However, my dad has been a movie buff for his whole life.
Oh yeah.
And in the basement at home, he's got a massive cabinet just full of DVDs. And thinking back to when we were talking about The Godfather, I mentioned that like he had a poster of like it's a vintage frame poster of the movie title, and he has I think he has them on DVD or VHS. I can't remember. But he also has Amadeus.
Nice.
And he has this really neat. He said it for years. He's got this really neat DVD with the box art. And I remember
Yeah.
seeing that as a kid and thinking, "Oh, whoa, that's so creepy. What's this movie about?" And I remember being like 10 at the time, maybe like 12. And he's like, "Oh, Jules." He calls me Jules. He's like, "Oh, Jules, when you're older, you gotta watch that movie. It is incredible. And so I did. And I watched it and it just blew my mind. Was such a it was such a wild, eccentric retelling of Mozart's life. Um and I just thought, wow, this guy was this guy was really something. Um and yeah, it was thanks to my dad really that I watched that movie. And it's it's been in my heart ever since.
That's awesome. I remember
Nice.
Yeah.
I remember being struck with the artworks as well when I was younger.
Yeah.
I think my grandparents were pretty well initiated with this film. I think my grandpa probably saw it when it came out back in the day because he is a person that likes to go to anything classical related, be it
Yeah.
shows or concerts or movies. My parents, I remember, rented it once, and I remember being struck by the box art, but I think they told me that I probably wouldn't be interested too much in this movie. Um,
Mhm.
and I didn't
Ooh.
see it then, but I saw clips of it, but it was really interesting. But it was like 3 hours long, and I
It
had
is a
no
long
attention. I had no attention span back then, but
yeah.
I did still have this deep-seated fascination with it. Like there were movies that my parents saw and they didn't really care for, but I eventually gravitated to on my own. I remember distinctly them renting out The Fountain one time, and that later became one of my favorite movies of all time. And then
Yeah.
I'm finally just seeing this film for the first time since I was younger, since I remember being struck by that image. I'm like, man, I've been sleeping on this. This is a this is a
Literally.
crazy movie.
Yeah.
And I
The
love
movie cover. Oh, sorry, go on.
the artwork is really striking, but just how eccentric of a character he was something I was completely unaware of. Like I felt like the rug was pulled out from under me, and he is kind
Mhm.
of like a rock star of his era, with like the
Oh
very
yeah.
bombastic wigs and everything.
Mhm.
It's also interesting that it's through a lens of this other character who is a very talented, well-regarded musician in his own right, but he feels absolutely dwarfed by, you know, Mozart's legacy.
Like who
That
is this clown?
who he's been actively trying to sabotage,
Mhm. Yeah,
and is
exactly.
pretty
Nice.
much confessing this throughout the duration of the film, which is so fascinating to me.
Guys, I gotta say that
Absolutely.
was such a smooth segue that I didn't realize we're talking about Amadeus now. Before we continue on, however, I brought two guests of my own because God put two of these people to punish me. I'm kidding, of course. Thomas and Claire McClelland, please
Hey, what's
introduce
up?
yourselves and tell us about your fascination with Amadeus and the historical significance of Amadeus the play and Amadeus the movie adaptation.
All right, do you want me to go, Claire, or do you want to go first?
Yeah, you can go first.
All right, all right. I have a bit of history with this film because um, I saw this film actually when I was a really young age, actually, probably too young to watch it, to be honest. So what happened was we used to have this cottage up north in Perry Sound that we would go for the
Mhm.
summer, and we would have this big shelf with movies and books and everything. And as a kid, they'd always say, "Thomas, pick a movie for us to watch for supper and all that," you know. So I looked around and I saw the box out for Amadeus. I'm like, "Ooh, what's this?"
Mhm.
And our dad was a musician, and he said, "You can watch that because why the hell not?" And it was the director's cuts, and I learned three things that day, pretty much.
Oh no.
I learned that I actually really, really love classical music, first of all, so there's that. Like, I've always been fascinated with classical music from that time, and I've always loved listening to it. I love seeing it in every movie I see, pretty much, all that. Third thing, I I wanted to become not a filmmaker at first. I wanted to become a conductor, apparently. I would always be caught, wave my arms, my hands around to every music I would listen to.
Yeah.
But then I realized I wouldn't do that because that's too much work, I felt. So, yeah. And third work, I think it was the first movie where I ever discovered what a boner was.
Jesus
Oh God.
Christ.
Well,
Well, of course,
Aw.
you watched the director's cut, and we didn't even mention the theatrical cut was PG. So the entire
Oh, yes,
scene with the
100%.
girl going to see Salieri a second time just straight up
That's,
didn't
yeah.
happen in the theatrical cut, apparently.
They cut it out because they were warning them, if you do that, we're going to give you, like, the X rating or something like that, pretty much.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true back
I
then.
know.
Yeah.
Censor bullshit, you know?
PG-13 wasn't really a thing till like Temple of Doom. Hey,
Oh, hell
Claire.
yeah, totally.
You're awfully quiet back there.
Oh, yeah. So, I think, yeah, at the same time we discovered that film, and yeah, we both saw the same cut. I would say that this really inspired me to listen to more classical music. It
Mhm.
actually got me more into like every kind of genre of music in general.
Hell yeah.
Because I don't really have a particular favorite. I listen to everything but country, basically.
I do the country. She just does everything else.
And I would say
Yeah.
that this film kind of inspired me to listen to more music. And everywhere I travel, I listen to music wherever I go. It's just
Mhm.
a huge part of my life. And he was just such an amazing composer, and it's incredible that even to this day his music is still played like everywhere. Not as much as like back in the old day, but it's still like with us.
Mm.
And you
I
said you want
regret.
to.
Go on.
You said you wanted us to mention the Broadway play, right?
That's correct. Go ahead.
So I looked it up. Apparently, the movie Amadeus, it originated as a Broadway play. Actually, it was an off-Broadway play,
Oh yeah, that's right.
and it's essentially the same. But the big thing that I always found fascinating was the guys who they got to play Salieri and Mozart in the Broadway version. What if I told you the guy who played Amadeus, Mozart, is Tim motherfucking Curry in it, pretty much?
No.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh.
What?
That'd
Yes,
be it.
Tim Curry as Mozart. And guess who played Salieri?
Who?
Well, you shall not
Oh
pass!
my fucking god.
Yes, Ian McKellen played Salieri in that. And there's no footage of it anywhere, and I'm like, one of these days, by God, I'm gonna find that footage and watch the hell
You're
out
gonna
of it.
pull a Kubrick and just do some like 4K archival footage recover.
If anybody listening to this in the future invents time travel, for the love of God, film that production. We need that.
Yes, we
I
need
know,
it
right?
to happen. Nice. And
Yeah, what
what about the
I mean,
production of the movie? Wasn't that a little troubled in of itself?
A bit, yeah, because I remember that they had big problems with budget because
Mhm.
Milos Forman was insisted on getting everything historically accurate to
Yeah.
the point where they would go over budget like a whole bunch of times.
Oh my god.
Now, a lot of it was shot
Yeah.
in real locations. Like only 4
Yes.
sets were created for the entire movie. One of them was a staircase, just a simple
Wow.
staircase.
Most
is
of it was
insane.
like shot in like Prague or something, right?
Yep, and
I mean-
Salari's
Yeah.
mansion is like a real house. Like that was the most surprising one because I was watching and I was like, surely this is a set. Like it kind of has a set feel to it. Like it's too good to be true almost. But no, it legitimately was a real house that they just touched up and cleaned and yeah, it very exceptional in that regard. I regret to announce this is the first time I have seen this movie. I've been beating around the bush, and this is the first. I mean, Thomas, you're aware of this. The first time I mentioned it, you
It's-
literally stopped
yeah.
recording and almost
Yeah,
walked away in the opposite direction. You're so mad.
It's like my favorite film. Come on, man.
I know.
I put
And
it on my
watching
top 10 and everything.
and watching Amadeus for the first time, I was a little worried because I personally think the 80s is kind of an overrated period for cinema. Like, there's a lot of classics I watched from the 80s where I'm just like, it was fine. It was okay. Like, Back to the Future, I felt it was fine. Groundhog Day, that movie would be nothing without Bill Murray, let's be honest.
Oh, hell yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
I think that was the
Ghostbusters, same
90s,
deal.
but anyway.
Oh.
But yeah.
Yeah, close enough,
I'm
yeah.
not sure. But Amadeus was awesome. I watched the director's cut, and I loved it. I feel like it was a little bloated at parts, but by the end of it, it definitely won me over, and I can definitely see the cultural impact that this film can have. That even through like its historical inaccuracies, people are still willing to look past that to see like such a compelling display of like just pure unadulterated passion for music. Like in spite of like some historical changes, the passion for music like stays throughout. And I love that they never dumb down the music talk. I love how they never introduce a character whose sole purpose is to explain the whole plot to them. Cough, Ellen Page in Inception. Cough.
And if you look at
Yeah.
sorry, if you Google Mozart and like actually look into the history of him, like his personality and records of how he acted in around people, he actually was an unstable
weirdo,
guy.
right?
He was known for flying into fits of rage and just being utterly jealous of other people. And
Incredibly childish.
Oh, yeah.
he
And
he was
Mhm.
he was a great composer, but he was also not the nicest person.
No.
He was
yeah.
like the
Yeah,
18th
he was
century
like a
Michael
big
Jackson,
baby.
right?
I
Yeah.
mean, I think he was, you know, brought up as a child prodigy, and he
Yeah.
was like toured around and made to show off to these elite people his talents at a young age. So I think
Mhm.
it makes total sense that he would regress to that childlike kind of
Oh yeah.
mindset. You can compare him to Michael Jackson in that regard for his time.
Oh,
Like,
yeah. He started doing music when he was like 5, so yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
so
He's a
I
child
think that
prodigy.
mindset absolutely plays into it. But I like how they characterize him as he has like I don't know if he's like meant to be coded as somewhat autistic, but just the way he laughs is
Yeah, like his
Yeah,
head's
yeah.
not
Oh my
all there,
god.
but it somehow is.
Not
I
at all.
love the first scene you see him and he's just like screwing around with his wife, and at first like you think
Yeah.
it's just completely
Sure.
juvenile, but then it becomes like kind of cute when he like
It,
asks her to
it was
marry
just
him and asks
yeah. It was
Well,
yeah,
we
to his
eyes
life.
him,
They,
yeah.
they weren't married at the time, but yeah, he's just gonna running around with this girl, and then
Yeah.
He at
Salieri
least loves
just
his wife.
Sally always
Oh
like,
yeah.
that was an accident.
Uh,
Like, there's no
and
way.
I remember they brought up some actual letters that Mozart wrote, and it's just a big string of like fart jokes and really
Poop
just
jokes too,
Lick
yeah.
me
just
arsch. What does that translate to,
Yeah.
Thomas?
Lick my ass nice and clean.
Actual title of one of his songs. And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
made me laugh harder than it should have. Like, yeah, he
He
was
was known
just.
for loving toilet humor.
oh
Yeah,
yeah.
Eh,
he's just this juvenile
Universal.
brat, and yeah, the heavy, like the '80s heavy metal influence, like you guys said, is very present. Like he goes to a lot of parties. He's
Oh, yeah.
kind of like anti, like aristocratic. You know, he's not really a
Yeah.
big fan of being part of the system.
And I think this film really influenced a lot of music videos in the 80s too. Like there are so many music
Oh,
videos
yeah.
that went
Oh
for that
yeah.
like old school Victorian look. I'm thinking of
Mhm.
Walking on Broken Glass.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if you
I think
watch
that's
that
another
music
reason
video,
why.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I interrupted you. No, I interrupted you. Sorry.
No, it's just like if you watch the music video for that and several others, they were totally taking influence from this production.
Absolutely. Yeah, so much pop culture influence. Like Steven said before,
Oh yeah.
if you've seen a movie like this, if you haven't seen this movie, you've seen this movie because it's been referenced so many times. And Family Guy continues to be completely unoriginal because I suddenly realized how many references they made alone to
Yep.
Amadeus. And I particularly like the, it wasn't Stewie who was laughing at me. It was God!
It was God.
Yeah, like that was referenced. Yeah, and just that I love F. Murray Abraham so much.
Oh, hell
Oh my
and I'm
god,
kicking
yes.
myself for not seeing him in this movie and this performance. Like, just the acting for his eyes. Like, there's so many scenes where he has to pretend
my
to be
god,
friends with
yeah.
Mozart. He has to
So
pretend
good.
to be friendly with the Emperor. But the
Yeah.
venom in his eyes in certain
Oh,
scenes
100%.
just
Fucking yeah.
shows.
Just he
So
has this
well.
like seething resentment throughout the whole thing, and it's like he's trying to be helpful because he's trying to uphold his job, but he's really sabotaging things. And
He's
yeah,
gaslighting him, right? So yeah.
Yeah.
oh,
Like,
very
Mhm.
much. But like he really can't squander like his talent, even though he goes through all these different phases of
Oh, hell
I
yeah.
love seeing the creative process of how he created his music. I think that's presented so well. Like and actually across these films, I think they do a really good job showing just the creative process and how
100%, yeah.
in different
the
ways. Yeah.
things in his life affects the music he's creating. Like after later on when his father dies and that whole thing.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
Oh my
oh
god,
man.
that yeah.
Yeah, the spirit that haunts, the
That's
character
my
throughout.
favorite section, man.
Yeah, it's a lot of
Don
people's
Giovanni.
favorites. Yeah, Don
Interesting
Giovanni.
fact, when I was in high school,
Oh
we had this
no.
Halloween costume thing, and I went there dressed as the general from Don Giovanni, all decked out in like
You did?
hoods and robes and stuff. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And just that contrast. like-
Nobody, nobody even got what that reference was except Claire.
no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to disappoint you. But
I know.
everything about the production is fantastic, but I think what really carries the story is that contrast between Salieri and Mozart,
Mozart.
where Salieri sees everything he does as a competition. And Mozart, I'm sorry about that. And Mozart couldn't be like any further from that. There's a scene where like Salieri like shows off his musical number to Mozart, and Mozart's like, hey, I got a better idea. Let me fix it up right now. Just something that came up. It's completely genuine, but Salieri just sees this as, oh, this guy's making mockery out of me. You know, he's
he's like one-upping him. He says, so you're having trouble here. What if I did this instead and makes it 100% better?
But I think it's genuine. I don't think he's trying to one-up him.
It absolutely is, but he definitely doesn't have that like situational social awareness to think that like he may be stepping on his toes. But even if like it is absolutely an improvement, it is like a genuine thing that he's feeling. Maybe it just wasn't his place to do that, but he just took it as like spiteful.
And of course, like his relationship with like the opera singer, where it's like, I never touched her, I never laid a finger on her, but I was mad when Mozart was going after her. It's like, okay, if you never wanted to lay a finger on her, then why are you so upset that Mozart's after your girl?
Apparently, the whole angle of him being celibate is complete fiction.
A lot of it is. Yeah. Apparently, they didn't hate each other as much.
Yeah, they were like frenemies almost.
Yeah.
I think it does weirdly add to his character, though, just to show how much he's kind of, I don't know, suppressing himself to try to keep up the work. I don't know.
God, yeah.
But please, God, just kill him. Just get rid of him. Like, it's simultaneously sad, but also like kind of funny in an intentional way. Just like all of this anger towards God, all of this passionate hatred towards Amadeus, to the point where like he feels the need to very nearly like screw around on his wife because he thinks Mozart was all over his opera singer, which in reality he really wasn't. Like, it was just kind of like a one-time fling, and she was just happened to be into him at the right place in the right time. But he has to convince himself and tell himself that this is a competition. Like, it's not enough. Like, he's simultaneously his biggest fan and his biggest enemy. Like, he has to drive himself into this competitive mindset. There's so many people like that. So I could see why they would make that historical change, because admittedly it does make for a more interesting story and definitely a more interesting movie. In my opinion.
Yeah.
Here's a theory.
And like even in the beginning of the movie, like when I forget who it was, when we see Salieri as an old man.
Yes.
Yeah.
The priest that he's talking to, or
yes, thank you. Yep. And and he's being questioned about his relationship with Amadeus. Like, even Salieri, he's like, excuse my language here, but he's just like, this motherfucker.
this bitch.
There is no need to excuse your language on this show. We
swear like fucking say
it's all good.
It's fine.
He's like, let me tell you about this guy.
Yeah, literally. Like the scene where he plays his song, and the priest is just like, I'm so sorry, I don't recognize it. He plays Mozart's number, doesn't even finish it, and on the spot, the priest is like, I know that song. He's like, well, I did write it. It's like in like 10 minutes, we can feel the pain that he is going through.
There's just resentment. Like he's playing his little pieces, and they're nice pieces. But even as an audience member now, you instantly recognize Mozart's pieces over his. But what's interesting about this film is that this film ironically helped spark revival in Salieri's music. People were suddenly more interested in his stuff after seeing this, because this film isn't even mostly about Amadeus as it is about how Salieri views Amadeus, which I think is a really interesting angle to take.
It's
it.
so
Like,
unique.
It could have been just a straight up biopic from Mozart's perspective, but I like that we kind of see it from this other person's point of view, and how someone that we regard so well today might have been, loathed in this time period because of how much of a talent he was. He was just this, sheer force of, So it's really interesting how that works out. I think it was brilliantly written and constructed, the whole thing.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Oh my god, yes.
Yeah. So
if you want to talk about talent, you could always bring up the fact that Salieri was like, not only does he a great composer, he also taught other guys to do their stuff, including a very young Ludwig Beethoven, actually.
Yes, that's right.
I read about that. That's true.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like, he's a very talented artist in his own right. Somebody I was rewatching the clip where they're composing Amadeus' next piece. Like, he's in bed, he's sick, and Salieri's writing all this down. I read a comment saying, in order to write all of that down, so fast, coherently, is a talent in of
Mhm.
itself. Like, this man
Oh yeah.
has got what it takes. Like, he has everything. And I think this
Mhm.
is a theme that kind of carries on to Tar as well, to a certain extent, where they have everything they need, but it's not enough. It's not enough
Totally.
when somebody else is apparently better, that they, kind of overshadow their own talents. It's really sad that, like, he can't see his own greatness. He always compares himself to someone else.
I also have to say that scene where so like toward like the latter half of the film, when Mozart's been getting sick from I forget what he had exactly.
I think it said that he had like a fever sprung from liver disease
Tuberculosis?
because
That's
something like that.
I think so.
Yeah.
But it's like
He
he's
had
sick in
TB.
bed, and Salieri's there helping him, and suddenly there is no ego. He's just helping him write down this music, and I thought that
Hmm.
was a brilliantly done scene. It is a little too fast, but I think for the pacing of the film, it works,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it would feel that fast if you're trying to jot this down. But I love how they are just in this moment, just purely creating for like the
If
first
you want to
time.
talk about,
And
if you want to talk about
again,
why it's
no dumbing
fast, I
down.
know
Go
why
on.
it's fast.
Ooh.
The reason it's so fast is because F. Murray Abraham and Tom Hall had these sort of very small earbuds in their ears, and for that scene they had these actual music experts to talk about what this would be, And at one point
Yeah.
you see Tom Hall kind of just pause. It's because his thing short-circuited for a minute.
Shit.
Oh, it's funny, just like a pause.
Yeah.
But no, I really I appreciated that how accurate the music lingo was. Like to my ears, it all sounds very true to what I've heard when I was in school. I haven't brushed up on music theory in a while, but it feels very authentic, and I like that the film went the extra length to make it authentic rather than try to fake around it. And most of the playing in what I've seen in this film is very authentic and believable. And
Supposedly,
I
it's all
was
accurate.
and I was
Yeah,
just
well,
reading this
yeah.
as well. They didn't use any artificial lighting in this film, which absolutely
Nope.
blows my
Oh, they
mind.
didn't, yeah.
I can see
Like,
that.
which no, and I think that's fantastic. I know Stanley Kubrick did a very similar
Yeah,
thing with
for
Barry
Barry
Lyndon,
Lyndon, right? Yeah.
or for the most part, he used just natural lighting, which I think is very fitting for a
The
period
candles, yeah.
piece. That it's either candles or it's natural light coming through. Actually, no, I think Barry Lyndon they did use some artificial lighting,
Just
but
a few
not
ones, yeah.
Barely
Yeah.
any,
Yeah.
in
but
fairness.
very but no, if this used all natural lighting, it was beautifully shot. Like it
Yeah,
looks
Hell
fan.
yeah.
Yeah.
looks stunning. Absolutely. And I'm
I do have to
wondering,
say, though,
because I know Barry Lyndon had to use lenses from NASA because the lighting
Well,
was so low. I'm wondering if there were enough jumps in technology where they didn't have to resort to such techniques, or they just didn't
maybe
try
I
shooting as many shadows, so that probably helped. Because Barry Lyndon, there's a lot of shadows. There's a lot of
mm,
dark, and
I
that
mean
movie's aesthetic.
they were trying to do a whole scene with just candlelight, so that's where that came into play. And that's Stanley's will be very particular when it comes to lenses and things. I
Oh,
haven't
hell yeah.
studied the how the cinematography was done too much into this, but I do think that it was absolutely gorgeous. I love how they had there were these shots that were through these like alleyways in the streets that came up twice. I think one time with Mozart walking through the streets, and the other time with like this masked figure walking through the streets, and it's the exact same kind of setups. And I don't know, I really appreciated those shots for some reason, and
Yeah,
I
there's a
just
lot of
loved how it was
detail all
composed.
around.
I remember, and I think if my parents saw this on VHS back in the day, and those those frames are definitely like butchered on that format because it's like a this beautiful widescreen aspect ratio, kind of cram it into a box. But
Yeah, nicely done all around. There's something else we need to talk about. Wigs. The
Oh,
wigs in this
yeah.
Oh
movie
my
are
It is
so
god.
much fun. I mean, I understand that's a product of its time, but there were some scenes where I was just like, isn't there just one person without a wig? Like Salieri's like the only one who doesn't wear a wig in some scenes.
I mean,
It's
this
when I
was
was
like,
insane.
watching this movie, when
yep.
I was watching this movie, I just thought I just couldn't take my eyes off Amadeus's wig. I'm like,
Yeah.
it is so fluffy.
I mean,
Especially
hey,
the
his
one where,
wife's wig is pretty floofy too. I mean, come on.
oh
The
yeah,
one's big.
But
So
his
it's
was
second
like
place.
it was like rolled on the sides, and then it was kind of like spiky in the center. I'm like, wow,
Mhm.
wow. Okay, go off,
Damn.
boss. Like,
yeah.
Damn.
He's got that whole pink brush in the middle, and I like how
Oh
he
yep,
was like
yeah.
going back. There's that
yep.
one scene where he's going back and forth, and he's like, "I love them all." know,
Yeah.
I was given 3 heads.
oh man.
That
Tom.
laugh. Oh my god, that laugh. Do you
It
think Tom
started by
Holtze
laughing.
came up with that laugh himself? Do you think? Or was that
I
just something
wonder.
he worked on? They were
I'm
just
not
like, he
sure.
needs ridiculous laugh. Give us
I think Mozart actually did have an incessant laugh.
that makes
He
sense.
did laugh like
yeah.
a madman. Yeah.
Yeah, I
But it
mean,
might have
That
also
laugh
been
that is very annoying.
it's
this
not for
video.
sure like it's a hunch, so it
It
might
is.
have also just been exaggerated.
that's
Oh,
true.
yeah.
Yeah, for like
And-
entertainment purposes.
And I think this film takes some creative liberties and exaggerates some things, but I think it's true to very much the spirit of it.
Oh,
And
totally, yeah.
yeah, I can excuse all of that, I think, because I think it's
Agreed.
very true to
Mhm.
the spirit of the music, and there's
Mhm.
definitely a lot of passion that's been put into it, and I love just the dedication to, like, even though they went over budget with it, I
Right, a
think
couple
that
times.
all
Oh.
pays off on the film. Like, this film has held up so well, and this is the first and only film I think I've seen from Milos Forman. I haven't seen his other stuff, but I think all of his films are
Oh.
pretty well. Oh no, wait, what else did he do?
He did Man on the
Um,
Moon, though, right?
Okay, no, I have seen that. Man of the Moon was
Yeah.
great. Damn.
I haven't seen that one yet. I think this is
He
straight
also
up the only
did
one I've seen.
The People versus Larry Flint. He also did that one.
Okay, I haven't seen that one, but
It's on my list.
Yeah.
It's on my list. Yeah, like the production all around is great. Like the cinematography is great. We didn't even talk about the
One Flew Over the
transitions.
Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh,
Yeah, that
One
was
Flew Over
him,
the
yeah.
Cuckoo's
Oh,
Nest.
damn.
Man, actually, I think that's the first one of his films that I had seen. That was
I
wild,
haven't seen that either.
Oh, yeah.
crazy. But anyway, you were saying about
The production design in general is great, but we didn't even talk about the editing and the transitions were
Oh,
so
yeah.
good. Like
Oh.
just the hard cut from like the
Mhm.
opera singer to the stage. Anytime it like transitions to the stage, like it never feels super obvious, but when it does happen, you just think, yeah, it just feels right. Like you can't even pinpoint
love-
how it works. It just
there
does.
was this one scene. I forget who the woman was who was nagging him for something.
Oh,
there's another
that
one,
was so
yeah.
funny. It just
and then
hurts.
and then it cuts to like this operatic performance. Like I think he took her nagging and interpreted it musically for the production, which is
The
such an
nagging
artist
too,
thing to do, to take anything that happens to you and interpret it artistically. And I love
I
that.
can concur
just
to
just
that
just seeing
one.
that kind of transition, and that'll come up later in the other two films. But there are certain moments where they kind of just take something that's happening to them in their life or in the environment around them, and they'll interpret it musically somehow. And I love that.
Nice.
That's basically sampling before sampling existed.
It was. It was.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
great all around. I will say, I watched the extended cut. I did feel like it was a little bloated. Like, I feel like the first 2.5 hours, they fly by for me. Like, it's just so engaging and well paced, and the conflict between Salieri and Mozart, or the non conflict, however you want to look at it, was like really engaging. I feel like
Yeah.
as soon as Mozart starts getting sick, I do feel like it drags a little bit. It's got a good payoff. I love the ending, and I love them making the song. But I feel like at like the 2.5 hour point and everything leading up to that moment, I feel like it was kind of like the same thing over and over again. Like it was kind of beating me over the head about what Amadeus was going through and how Salieri was tricking him. Like, yeah, I get it. Like I feel like
It's like
this
a
could have been
slow
like
burn,
10
right?
minutes instead of like 30 minutes. Like I feel like it would have dragged out, but at the same time, I don't know if theatrical cut would fix that, because missing out on like the extended opera scenes and telling us either or not Mozart's wife goes back to Salieri or not, like those are details I don't want to miss. So I don't know if the theatrical cut is inherently better, but the extended cut seemingly feels a little bit bloated in my opinion. That's it for me. Like if it trimmed like 15 or 20 minutes, it would have been 10 easily. But it is a little bloated in my opinion, and there's some like dated stuff. Like I feel like the old person makeup like was good at the time, but I think now it looks a
It
little
was good for
silly
1984. So
and
yeah.
overdone. But like again, that's just the product of its time thing. I'm sure
I
at the
think
time
they
people
did
were like, "Oh my god!"
I think they were very smart to like backlight him when he was in the old man makeup, because that really
yeah.
makes
Yeah, anytime
look
he's in
believable.
like full lighting, it was just like.
You can see the fault lines a little bit if you squint, but it's not. I think it holds up pretty well for the
Yeah,
most part.
especially for the time. Like I can't. Again, it's so nitpicky that. Yeah, but that's it.
I
Though.
just
Yeah.
can't believe I slept on this film for this long. Like
Me
I
too.
probably wouldn't have had the patience for it as a kid, but watching it now is a treat. So I'm really happy we finally watched it.
Agreed. What would you guys rate it out of 10? Let's start with Julia.
I would easily rate it 9 out of 10. Because although I did say that, so I don't mean to segue, but although I did say in the beginning when I was introducing myself that my family is not like big music people, like we were never musicians, but like we always had a very strong appreciation for music. And so after watching this movie, I really came to appreciate music more, and the way it was just portrayed, like the cinematography and the passion that I saw from both sides really just like it really stuck. When I say both sides, I mean Salieri and Mozart.
Mhm.
It really just stuck with me, and I was like, oh my god, oh my god. So I would easily give it um a 9 out of 10 or like a 9.5 out of 10.
Ooh.
Oh yeah.
I would I do know what Ian means about it being bloated.
Mhm.
Um
Yeah.
and I do tend to agree with that. So that's yeah, so that's why I would say 9, but then again, I don't think I've ever given a movie 10 out of 10,
Really?
even if it was like really good.
Huh.
That's just me.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's very we always tiptoe on that threshold quite a bit on this show.
Yeah.
Like, well, like if we like the movie like really well enough, it's normally like an 8, and then we get really nitpicky with like the points
Mhm.
between
Yeah.
8, 9, and 10.
Like there were definitely things that I would fix or change, but the
Mhm.
like the way it was, even in moments of grandiose in that movie, it always had dark undertones. Like you
Mhm.
knew that
100%.
something was gonna go wrong, or like Mozart's high was gonna turn into a low at some point.
Very Shakespearean in that
Um,
sense. My friend Matt was telling me.
yes,
I
Yeah.
I,
and I
I think
really
it.
liked that because
Yeah.
he did have a sad life.
Mhm.
Yes, he did.
And being a prodigy is never easy, and it can suck at times. And the movie just did a really good job at portraying that. And I just chef's kiss, loved it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Aw.
And yeah, again, I feel bad that I've slept on it this long because I knew this film was like considered a masterpiece, but I didn't really know or appreciate why that was for the longest time. And yeah, I
Mhm,
was floored by it. I would give it, yeah, I think I'd probably give it like an 8 or a 9, or
mhm,
maybe an 8.4 just to be right in the middle.
Sounds good.
I do think there probably is like a happy medium between the director's cut and the theatrical. I'd have to compare them and see what's missing. But
Me too.
I know some directors have gone back and forth and created multiple cuts of their films for
mhm.
this reason. Like
Lord of
that's
the
why we
Rings.
yeah, Lord of the Rings, or that's why
Ridley
there's like
Scott.
a
Yeah.
there's the
Um,
theatrical cut, a director's cut, and a final cut of Blade Runner. Um,
yeah.
and even more
Wow.
recently, Apocalypse Now, they did the final cut
Yes.
version of that,
Oh,
Oh man.
or Godfather 3,
That's a whole other can of worms right there.
which
Yeah.
I still need to see the newer cut of Godfather 3. I'm curious if it makes it better.
I'm gonna press X to doubt on that one. Thomas, what would you give Amadeus?
All right. All right. All right. All right. Well, I'm gonna have some bias with this one because this was essentially my childhood growing up. So there's that. And it's also on like my top 10 list for my channel and on my letterbox thing. So there's that also. So you're gonna hear a lot of praise from me. I'm the kind of guy that likes long films because I like to be immersed a lot. So there's that.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Like, I have no life. What can I say?
gee.
Throwing
So,
yourself out of
okay.
With just
I'll
a
try to
healthy amount of self-deprecation.
just a little, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll try to be brief with my thing with the film. It's just this film essentially is the film that made me listen with films instead of just
Mhm.
watching. It made my ears get immersed with film as a whole, pretty much. And I'm always the same. I'm always the guy that wants to look up the soundtrack to every film I look at. And just the performances with both these actors, with every actor really, even Jeffrey Jones, unfortunately, yes, the guy who played the Emperor, you know.
Yeah.
Don't remind me.
Yeah, but I I'll let that go. I'll let that slide and give this film a 9 out of 10 for me, pretty much.
Fuck yeah.
Oh yeah.
What about you, Claire?
Solid.
I would also say that this film is also a classic for me for my childhood. It really got me really involved with music, and it made me really appreciate the arts in general, not just like
Mhm.
music, but also like paintings and movies, and it really just like mind blowing, and I would also have to give. I would say I would give it a 8 out of 10. There were parts I agree that were just in my opinion kind of just dragged a little, and I kind of lost focus on some of it a little, but it always like get me right back into it though.
Hey.
I'm
Okay,
stuck
Amadeus.
between a 9 and a 9.5, so I'm gonna give this one a 9.3 out of 10.
Ooh.
Gotta go a little bit higher. I loved it.
Alright.
Finally, an 80s classic that wasn't disappointing for me, honestly. But yeah, I could see myself watching this again in the future. I'll see how the theatrical cut holds up. But yeah, F. Murray Abraham, man. Like, what else can I say? One of my favorite
I'm-
actors for a reason.
Does that guy... I have wondered, does F. Murray Abraham have someone in his contract that says he must have food in every scene?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Grand
Seriously,
Budapest
every
Hotel. Trying to think of other
Like-
examples.
Loaded Weapon 1?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Just every movie he's in. Well, maybe he
Every
really
movie
likes
he's in,
food.
even Scarface. Yeah.
Yeah, Scarface. Yeah, maybe he just really likes food. He's just like,
F.
hey,
Murray-
by the way, can we just throw like a little bit of food in the scene? Like,
F.
a
Murray
dessert?
Abraham, the original foodie, right?
Croissant au chocolat. Can we throw that into the script?
Oh my.
What a Chad. I will
Yeah.
never have a dessert with cream cheese in it, though. You filthy degenerate.
Yeah, that's
Moving on.
gross.
I just want to shout out to all the O faces that Salieri makes for the films. They're kind of fun.
I will give a special shout out to the fat guy that makes the appropriate face.
I mean, I'm not
going
gonna blame him. His
Yeah.
character is meant to be celibate, so I think music is probably his only outlet for that. So anyway, moving on. At least according to the characterization. But man, wow, what a movie. So
Damn.
next we've got The Red Violin, which is a movie that I've been really wanting to talk about for a while. I remember seeing this back in history class when I was in high school, and this was something that my teacher had
History,
put on, and I don't even know if it was related to what we were talking about. It was just somewhat historical, and he just wanted a break from the curriculum, and he thought, hey, this is a neat movie you guys should see, and he put it on, and I didn't know it was a Canadian film, but
Yeah, it was Montreal, right?
yeah.
Yep.
Once you see Don McKellar pop up, I swear he's in like every fucking Canadian film ever made. Just about. But you know damn well it's a Canadian film if Don McKellar shows up, who's also the screenwriter in this. But
Oh, yeah.
anyway, this is a film directed by a guy named Francois Girard, who has made some other musical inspired films since. But I think this is probably his like most successful one, and I think it's still rather underrated. But this is the story of a violin that is up for auction, made by a fictional luthier from Italy, um, and it's going up for like millions of dollars. And the whole film basically cross cuts different time periods that this violin has traveled through from its inception to people that have acquired it since. And I think it's one of the most interesting and compelling stories that it's about an object really and all the lives it's affected. It's like the main character is the violin, which is kind of interesting, but it affects a lot of people's lives. And I love the way that the film is like structured with there's this woman who's like pregnant at the very beginning, and she's giving uh this woman is giving her this tarot reading, which like she thinks pertains to her life, but it ends up being a little more than that. I don't know what else I can say without spoiling too much, but uh this film has a special place in my heart. It's one of those things that once I saw it, I was just blown away by it, and it was one of the first films that made me think, "Wow, we actually have some interesting like movies that we made here in Canada." And it's funny because like Canadians are the people that care the least about Canadian cinema, I find. But I don't know. I think this film's an exception. I think it did win an Oscar for best score.
Yep.
the year that it came out, which I think it deserved. Which I think Tar was absolutely snubbed for not getting even a nomination for. But
Tar was
anyway, he did it.
all classical
Well,
music, though, wasn't it? Or some of it
what's
was
that?
composed for the movie too. That's right. We'll get into that later. Sorry, I'm
Yeah,
jumping the gun.
it was all pretty well composed for the movie, I think. But anyway, so yeah, this is I've seen this film quite a few times over the years. It's come up quite a few times. And I found out it's free on YouTube recently, which is awesome because more people can see it. But anyway, I think this is your guys' first time probably seeing this. Has anyone even heard of this movie before, or is it just me?
I've heard
No,
it.
I've heard of it. I've heard it
Okay.
passed around in college a few times.
Right on.
Nice. I'll let Thomas go first on this one. And by the way, Julia, Claire, if you care about spoilers, this is the time to mute us, and we'll text you when we're talking about Tar. But if you don't care about spoilers, listen in.
I
Sure.
was actually gonna try maybe like opt out because I haven't seen the other two films, and yeah, I don't know what.
Hey, that's all
Okay,
right,
fair
Claire.
enough.
You
Thanks-
have
That's all right.
good night,
Thanks for being here.
Claire. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah,
was
thank
great.
you.
Thank you.
See you later, Claire.
See you later,
Sure.
Claire.
Yeah.
Yeah, guys.
Have a good
Alright.
night.
Alright.
man.
I'm gonna hit the button here.
Yeah, hit the
There it
bricks.
is.
There you go.
Hit the button. You can do it.
Hit the
There we go.
bricks. All right.
Okay.
Spoiler warning
All right.
out. And here we go.
Okay.
Thomas, you go first.
Okay. Weirdly enough, also back to the cottage story. This was also another film that was on the shelf. Also.
Just lots of
Oh man,
violins.
we have a shelf of movies at our cottage too, and there's so many that we have that I have to work.
I know,
through, but-
right?
Are
Yeah.
you sure you aren't sharing the same cottage?
No,
I-
ours is in a different place. We're not in Perry Sound, but it's
Okay,
like
yeah.
it's if places, people that have cottages, that's where all the old movies tend to go, all the old VHS tapes and all the old DVDs.
Well, yeah, the place was owned by my grandfather, and I don't know, he was a professor at what was it, like somewhere I forget. Western. He was a professor at Western, and he always loved to listen to these classical music stuff. And I don't know, he also got in contact with my uncle, and my uncle was a film projectionist, and he would show a lot of Canadian films at theaters. And eventually, Red Violin got into the conversation somewhere, and they watched it, and my dad watched it, and he said, "Boy, do you got to watch this?" I was like, "Dad, why do you keep showing me this? I'm like 10 or 8 right now."
Yeah, why are
No,
these characters
you
making
gotta
loud
start 'em
noises
young.
while... Yeah,
You
why
gotta
are
start
these
them young.
characters moaning while violin is playing in the background? I don't get it.
Yeah,
but-
my dad was a strange fruit. What can I say?
Fair enough. I mean, I watched Alien when I was 5, so maybe I shouldn't judge. Might be a bit
Yeah.
harsh. This is the
I was
first
a little
time
scared watching that movie,
I've
too.
seen the Red Violin. I've heard it talked about for a while. I know the score is iconic, and the score is, I mean,
yeah,
by
totally.
far and away the best part about the movie. I thought it was decent, and that's the worst complaint I have about this movie because I wanted it to be great. It could have been great. But
yeah, maybe it's
here's
not
how
my
this experience kind of worked out for me. On the start, I was on board. There's this really cute romance that opens up, and the idea of this musician being so passionate towards an instrument that only the best can be used for his son, like that. Something about that resonated with me. And of course, then we get like this really cute, like child prodigy, like learning to play a violin and using the violin
Oh yeah,
to
yeah.
literally stop his heart problems, which is a little bit silly, but like I can let it slide. It kind of works for like a kid's story. And that was all great. But as soon as we transitioned to the gypsies, things got a little
Oh yeah.
too weird for my taste. And
Oh,
I've got to be
yeah.
honest, I really wasn't a fan of that segment and the segment in China, like, at all. Like, it felt like a different movie, not particularly in a good way. And I get what they were trying to do, and I respect what they were trying to do. But something about, like, the genuine nature of the movie, that even when it's at its worst, there's never an air of, as my friend would put it, the film just doesn't give a shit. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in the sense that the film will get incredibly silly, incredibly goofy, but be so genuine about it that it kind of works. And by the end of the movie, I'll admit, like, it did win me over. I was rooting for Samuel Jackson, spoilers, to take that
Oh yeah,
violin.
Samuel Jackson
Oh,
is in
yeah.
this.
He
which
has
is-
a bit part, but he's really good
It's
as
funny
bit part.
because like he's hardly in it, and I think he's there just to sell tickets. But
Oh,
I mean,
hell
Yeah.
yeah, totally.
I think he does. I think he has a good role in it, though.
He does a really
Yes,
good
yeah.
job, and I do kind of like the balls of like using a big star to a minimal amount. Like they don't try to milk him as much as possible. Like they give him like a small but important role to play, and that's I kind of like the balls for that. And I will
I mean, if
admit,
this was a Tarantino
yeah,
film, then you know he'd be a lot in there.
it did
Oh
kind
yeah.
of win me over by the end, but I just wish it wasn't such a rocky journey to get to that point.
This
There's
is
a
one of the
lot to
few roles
appreciate.
he has where he doesn't say one motherfucker, and
I
it's a.
know.
I think this
I
film
was
would have been
waiting
a
for
perfect
that.
10 out of 10 if he did say that.
Crushing
But
disappointment. He said, "I gotta steal this motherfucking violin." That would have been boom, boom.
That would have been
Well,
so good. Yeah.
spoilers.
yeah,
Oh
that would
man, man.
there's a lot to appreciate about it, but there's a lot of borderline stupidity and weird tonal
It
shifts that hold it back
it's
for me.
definitely a. I'd say it's definitely a product of its time. It does believe in
Yeah.
itself quite a bit, which I think you need to.
Yeah, and that's why it
This
kind
is
of
a
works. Yeah.
script that Don McKellar wrote, and I didn't realize just how
Yeah.
much of
Yeah.
a writer like he was. Like he's often known for just little bit parts in movies, and he does have a bit role in this as the technician that
Yeah.
analyzes the acoustic frequencies. I do think they take some creative liberties. There's like an element of magical realism to it. I
Just a
actually
sad, yeah.
I actually really like the gypsy sequence. There, particularly
Oh,
one
that was
shot
great.
that they
Yeah.
do where it's like this snorri cam rig, but on the violin, where you see um
People playing for the years, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's just really cool, just the dramatic twists and turns that
And the
this
way it's
object
shot
has,
too,
and
like it's like a centering
yeah,
on. It's like a steady cam shot, but it's like attached to the violin and it moves with the violin. I'm
yeah.
wondering,
Which
Thomas. I saw
I
that.
think
Yeah, go on.
I think all they did was they just put like the violin on a stick, and then that's on mounted to the camera. So they're holding up the violin
World's first
and the
selfie.
camera. They probably have
They just invented the GoPro then, technically.
Yeah,
more or
exactly.
less, but this was back in the '90s when it was a big like film camera. It might have been like a smaller one that they had, but you know that's a
Can you
film
imagine
camera
holding
you're
that
lugging around.
Yeah,
like a
imagine.
big fucking hammer on a violin stick? It's like, God damn it, this thing's so heavy.
God, yeah, your upper body strength increases tenfold.
They would have had to counterweight it somehow. I think like
Somehow, yeah.
Yeah.
there's probably some straps under the clothes so that it's counterweighted. Like if you see snorri cam rigs, there's a big camera mounted to you, and they have a whole vest, so that your body counterweights the camera. So they had to have done something like that.
They
But it's
had to.
such a unique shot.
Really
That I
effective.
think is a standout in this film.
I'm curious, guys. Do you think that was the inspiration for the little dice aging sequence in City of God? Because I kind of got
Ooh,
those vibes a little bit, and it is
maybe. I
like
mean,
obviously
City of
different
God.
messages and themes, but it's kind of similarly shot, and it is a similar transition with like music that fits like the scene and the time period as this character like as these characters, or more so this violin changes through time. No one
Oh,
surprised me.
hell.
I
Yeah,
could see
maybe.
that. I mean, it came out some years after this.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah,
2002, I think, is when that movie came
Yeah,
out. So I could
2002,
see
exactly.
yeah.
it having inspiration. But I love when they are just creative with the camera work to
Yeah,
capture this.
it's a
And
lot of really cool
again,
shots.
this is like one of the only films that I've seen where it's the story of an object and how it's affected many people's like lives, different time periods. And it's interesting just seeing how it's been passed around. And this is kind of the story that people that sell off old instruments always tell. They always track its history and weave this very, grandiose narrative attached to it, which, could be fluffed up for just to sell it. But it's interesting just actually having a film that shows that. I mean, you see this happen with guitars these days, especially
Yeah.
like they'll bring up instruments from like the 50s and 60s, and they'll have this whole story. I actually overheard on the radio, Bachman Turner Overdrive, had this guitar back in the day that he recorded most of his big hits on, this like orange Gretsch that was stolen out of the hotel room that he was in Toronto, and he had been trying to track it down for like 40 years. Finally gave up looking for it, and then this man from Japan, or I guess, gets in contact with him somehow, and he thinks that that he found his guitar, and he was in a pawn shop somewhere, or he was in this like guitar store, and he had was like looking at other instruments, and he said that like orange scratch just spoke to him, and he didn't even realize that that was like Bachman Turner's guitar, which is kind of crazy, and it's just like a crazy real world parallel with this film, because that's what this film feels like in a nutshell, because the violin does end up in a pawn shop at some point. But
I think the story of the whole Red Violin was also inspired by a lot of these old 16th century tales of these violins that were like possessed by the soul of the person that made it and stuff like that. It sort of made its way into popular culture over the decades, pretty much. So yeah.
Yeah, very fantastical. Kind of feels like a fable.
Yeah. It
Almost.
was based on a real story, I believe, which is
Something like
yeah.
that, yeah.
But it is
They took some
definitely
liberties.
it's definitely very mythologized. There's
Yeah.
lots of elements of magical realism. I mean, spoiler alert, but the reason the red violin is red is because it was painted with the blood of
Blood,
the
right?
of of the luthier's pregnant wife who had passed away in childbirth. Um,
Oh, Italy.
Although if you actually did paint the violin with blood, it wouldn't look like that though. Apparently, it would turn black.
It would,
So that
yeah.
Yeah,
so
because
that's like one flaw. But I do think that the poetic license the film takes, it doesn't take away from that for me.
it doesn't take
Um,
itself too seriously, so stuff like that can
mhm.
kind of slide. But
Well,
Yeah.
yeah,
you could argue it takes itself very seriously, but I think it
Ah.
works.
I mean in the sense that like it's not hyper realistic. We'll say like
Mhm.
it feels very
I
fantastical
will say though,
as
the
far as
playing is all very authentic in this. I mean,
yep.
it's either played for real or it's mimed very well by people that actually know how to play the parts. So,
Like the kid like miming the
oh
violin
yeah,
was insane. Like I was just like,
that
oh, he did it, but apparently
yeah,
no, that was all
she's
miming.
no, that kid was an actual child prodigy. And
Oh,
he is
totally, yeah.
still well regarded in Germany for his
Really?
playing. Thanks in parts of this film, but this was like a showcase of his talent. Um,
Yeah,
which man,
just
I
insane.
really feel bad for that kid. What happened to him?
Oh
Ah,
yeah, like he got so nervous that like he had the heart attack. Like you know what's coming when you hear
Oh
like the
man.
thump. Yeah, very effective, and the fact that like they mentioned that the violin was buried with the kid, and just that long like take on the shot of his previous father. Like you know what has to happen, you know what's going to happen,
But
and
like,
the image
yeah,
of the desecrated grave like was
it
a
was
great
kind.
footnote to that.
But like even his mentor that had hired him on, and invested all this time and money that he doesn't have into him, he after they bury him, they asked him, "Oh, what happened to the violin? Like, I need to make my money back somehow."
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, like it's unfortunately like greed kind of like towers over art at the end of the day, and I think that's kind of a consistent theme with like
I
the
mean, that's
auction and the obviously the violin going to very questionable people like the the sexy
oh
British man,
yeah.
which by the way that is my least favorite segment by a wide margin. Like I'm never
I
really a
think he's
fan of unnecessary sex scenes in movies, and that's kind of
Oh,
prime
it's
example
hilarious in
of
this
that.
movie, though. Like,
I no,
well,
come on, that joke is so tired. Just the
it,
whole classic hijinks of like, oh, where's this person at this important meeting? Oh, he's too busy getting fucked. Oh shucks. Oh gee whiz, man,
interesting
what is
fact, that
that
guy
man
may have
doing
been
instead of being at that important thing he's supposed to do?
well, I think he's somewhat based off a real life violence from that time, who wasn't called Frederick Poe, he was called something else. And he was known to hang out with a lot of Romani travelers and taking them on to his concerts and stuff like that. But he wasn't anything quite like we saw in the movie, pretty much.
he definitely is like played up like a rock star back in the day.
Or
Like
like
he's
a
very
The
much
devil.
long
like
hair,
Yeah, he's compared to a devil for the tarot cards.
he's very much like a Mick Jagger kind of virtuoso character.
It's so
of course
But
he is, yeah.
ridiculous. It's so.
oh, it's fun. But just the way he like grunts as he's playing is like so overtly sexual. It's really funny, but
I guess like, but
yeah.
I guess it just like it feels like like the earlier segments were like dated in a charming way. It feels like the '90s Hollywood I love. That scene felt like the '90s Hollywood I hated, where they're just like, oh, let's just make it a erotic thriller out of nowhere. We literally have the scene of like the wife pulling out the gun on the the couple that just happened. Like it feels so out
Yeah.
of place and so dumb. And I didn't care. I was so emotionally invested in the story that happened beforehand that this just felt like a waste of time. And I kind of felt that like the Chinese segment takes it a little more seriously, but I don't know, parts of it felt very stupid and tropey and like a less interesting version of the pianist almost. Like I know the
It kind
pianist
of,
I
yeah.
think came out later than this, but
Oh, it did. It did. Yeah,
just
that
I don't
was.
know, it
Yeah.
felt very cheap and Oscar baity. It didn't feel it just didn't resonate with me. I felt like those two segments just felt like a waste of time, and I admit Like I was gonna give it a lower score until it got to that final segment where it won me over.
For Sammy J, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Sammy J is just the solution. You put Sammy J in a movie, it automatically becomes better. That's not entirely true.
He's here to save the day.
Exactly. And
That's right, motherfuckers. I'm here to save the day.
yeah, like that's just my biggest problem. It's kind of that classic problem with anthology movies where some anthology stories are just way more compelling than others, and that's like the case with almost every anthology. And I feel like this is kind of a similar case, but it's all like loosely connected, and some of it resonated with me, some of it didn't, but it also did. Like I have so many mixed emotions on this movie, and I wish
It's
I
the
liked
trick
it
or
more.
treat of violins, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, but I like that more.
I mean,
I like the
so-
movie more.
So this film does have some problems and it's quite dated, but I do think it's still pretty overlooked. Like I think it's like it did get an Oscar like recognition the year it came out for the score, and I do think it absolutely deserved that
Yeah.
because the score is fantastic. Like you can just listen to the score. It's on Spotify actually,
It's
and
magical music.
it's
I've had a few listens here and there.
It carried me
I
through the
think
segments.
that's it absolutely carries like the movie through through some of its rougher segments. I do think it holds up brilliantly well, and I do think it's a really yeah, I would consider it an underrated gem, and for me, it holds up pretty well. I mean, I think the most cliche, stereotypical thing is that the one black character ends up being a thief, but at least he's more than justified for it.
I didn't even think about that. Jesus. I mean,
But
that's
at
why
least
I
he's
was a French man
but
direct a movie.
but it's like oh, capitalism bad, money rich
Yeah, exactly.
musicians bad, but this guy's carrying on the legacy of the violin by stealing the thing. Um,
Yeah, but like I was actually kind of rooting for him. Like at that point, I was like, you feel like that passion of the music, and that's what I feel like was kind of lacking in the other two segments. Where it's like, and maybe that was the point where like the passion for the music wasn't really there, but the passion for the music really carries on with his character. Like even though he doesn't know this instrument particularly well, he just feels something with it. And it's kind of ridiculous and a little borderline plot convenience that he just so happens to feel this way about one instrument, but at the same time it is like weirdly wholesome and endearing enough, and you get enough emotional context of what the instrument has been through and how it's changed people's lives that it does come together in the end. And I will admit, from like an ambition perspective, this film is like it's a $10 million movie, Canadian made, like very low budget, very under the radar, and it looks this beautiful. It has so many different like historical periods. I don't know how accurate it is, but the fact
I
that a film with this low of a budget combines all these different settings and time periods so effectively and gets nominated for Oscars is honestly insane. Like it's bonkers. It's not something you hear
oh
about
yeah.
often enough even these days for Canadian cinema.
Oh yeah, like I think for Canadian cinema, it's absolutely fantastic. But like most Canadian cinema, it's often overlooked, and it definitely doesn't hold up to what it aspires to in some ways. But I do think this is an exception to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very well shot. I also like the metronome, even though like Thomas, were metronomes invented at that point in
Oh, let
time?
me see. Well, which section was that for?
That was the section for the child prodigy, and he brings out this
Actually,
device that's a lot like a metronome.
He creates his own version of a metronome.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough, though, actually, there were sort of like a prototype of the metronome that actually came out around that time.
Oh, you
but it
think that's what
wasn't
that
like
was?
what we. It wasn't what we saw in the movie, though. That was a little different than what we saw.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair
But
enough.
like in the movie, the character says that he invented this device that's meant to keep time, which it's probably not accurate, but I do like the idea of that this is of that time period. This is also right after the French Revolution. They're in
Yeah,
Vienna.
and weirdly enough, it's around the same time with Mozart stuff. So, like, cinematic universe, maybe.
But I do like that. I think this film was like the perfect bridge between kind of the time period piece that is Amadeus, and then the next film, which is more contemporary. This film completely bridges that gap. I think going from the classic period to the modern
See in
period.
between, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah,
That's true.
and we're
Kind of
seeing
a prequel
how
also.
like music, the way we look at kind of instruments and relative to this time period, and the way we look at the music in general has like changed. It's gone from like music that was contemporary at the time that these elites would create to something that's sort of commodified by people that are studying it in increasingly more niche circles.
Oh,
But
hell
it's
yeah,
interesting,
yeah.
just like just seeing how like the perception of like when did classical music become classical rather than contemporary, right? And I do think that this film kind of shows the bridge between those two
Like an
perceptions a little
evolution,
bit.
I guess, of music in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
but
literally progresses from the past to the present. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Nice. Won't you
absolutely.
guys give it out of 10? I think I've said my piece on it.
All right,
Uh,
all right. Want to
I'm
go,
quite.
or do you want me?
You go ahead, Thomas.
Okay. I'll admit, I have problems with this film. Like, kind of a few. I feel like it's the most 90s Canadian film I've seen, pretty much. And I've
Oh
seen
yeah.
erotica, so yeah. But, I mean, all in all, I think what really elevates the film above being pretentious, in my opinion, is if you get, like, the music, obviously, is going to be really good, so there's that, pretty much. And I'm a sucker for historical stuff, so admittedly, I'm always gonna love that kind of stuff. And Samuel Jackson honestly steals the show, in my opinion, and the violin, also, strangely enough. And
Nice.
it's a little joke. So I don't hate this film. I don't love this film. I'm sort of in the middle. I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10 for me.
Nice.
Yeah.
I have a lot of personal bias for this film. I think it's great. I have watched it. I found it actually better on rewatches in some cases. Some things have definitely dated, but I've got some personal biases with this film. I would give it personally like a solid 8. I really like it for what it is. I
Nice.
think it
Fair
just
enough. Yeah.
skirts under the surface of pretension.
Yeah.
Okay.
How could I not give the film with violin sex a 6.9 out of 10?
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
I think it's decent. I think it's good. But I wish and it could have been great. There's so much ambition that I wish it just matched up to.
Mm.
But I enjoyed watching it overall. I'm glad I saw it, but like a lot of movies of this caliber made in my country, I see even more potential. So
Fair enough.
that is my piece. Last but not
Fair enough.
least.
We're finally moving into Tar.
All right, well, I should probably let you guys go because I haven't seen this film. But thanks for having me on board and everything. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for stopping by, Thomas. You've been fantastic.
Invite me for the next ones, please.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Appreciate it. Thanks for giving us
All right.
some historical perspective on the topics.
It's the least I
Perfect.
could do.
Have a
Tar
good
time.
Okay,
night.
I'll see you guys later.
Sounds
All
good. Welcome back, Julia and Mason,
Thank you.
for listening in.
Nice.
All right, so Ian, are you introducing this one then,
Yeah, sure. I'll introduce Tar.
or
Tar.
did you wanna bring it on Julia?
Well,
Sure, I can do it. Okay.
go ahead.
So this movie, to be honest, I did see some similarities between it and Amadeus in the
Mhm.
way that you have two very powerful characters who are highly respected. And so Tar is basically about this conductor who has a big rise and fall.
Mm-hmm.
Um and she gets caught up in a web of first of all, her name is Lydia Tar,
Yep.
and she gets caught up in a web of conspiracy, and you slowly see her going from this great this great eloquent uh
World renowned.
powerful
Yep.
individual slowly becoming deranged, and you just see her falling apart and basically becoming catatonic. And so when I was watching it, just the way that it was, the cinematography too, like it was very cold and
Mm-hmm.
very brutal, like with the long
Take.
shots,
Yeah,
and
just these
how
like
the
wide
way
kind
the
of.
the way the characters interacted was very conversational. Like there wasn't any breaks. Um, it was very like it was very unnerving, and it gave it the sense like, oh man, something bad's gonna happen.
Yeah, something
Yeah,
doesn't
it was
feel right. Yeah.
yeah, like something doesn't feel right.
Some
Something's going on here. And yeah, Kate Blanchett, she's one of my all-time favorite actresses. And when I saw her in this movie, I was like, oh my god, queen,
man.
Hashtag
I
girl boss goals.
girl
I
boss.
I, I
But
I'd
she is
say
the ultimate. Yeah.
I'd
That's
say
true.
that she was robbed for the Oscar for Best Actress if Michelle Yeoh wasn't in Everything Ever All at Once this year. I mean,
Mm,
man, I feel so bad for Todd Field. This is like his first film that he's made since like 2006, I think,
Yep.
and this was supposed to be like the big comeback for film for him. And I think it's an excellent film,
yeah.
but Everything Everywhere just swept the whole season, and it kind of deserves it. But man, I do think that this film is fantastic,
To be
in a
honest, so
lot
I
of
think
ways.
Kate Blanchett was rooting for them a little
True.
bit.
No,
Like when they won, she was like, "Yes, go!"
Yeah, they are very much respect each other. If you see their interview
Mhm.
together on Actors, like they're both incredibly nervous. They're both blushing, and like there
Oh
is
my
a
god, I
genuine
love you. Oh
passion
my god, I love you
between them.
too.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
literally just the first 5 minutes is like I'm so nervous to be here. It's like what? No, I'm so nervous to be here. I'm like wow, I thought this was a conversation only Canadians could have.
Uh,
Sorry, no, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry.
just
Canadian standoff.
overly polite and complimentary, but man, I mean, just when my like apathy for like the whole Oscars was at an all-time high from last year, kind of won me over this year. Not gonna lie. Don't want to gush about
Mm,
it too much, but man, I mean, I do think that this is like an excellent film, and I think Todd Field spent a long time really studying this world to, you know,
yeah.
presented authentically, and there's a lot of stuff that they talk about that is very like realistic for people
Mhm.
that are like uninitiated. I've heard that it's been pretty alienating, like the way that they speak about it, but for me who's kind of a music buff, it just all made sense to me. And I love that the film opens up with her kind of standing off stage, kind of being nervous and having these little breathing exercises or ways that she's dealing with stress, and she's very like a put together person on the surface, but you
Very,
can tell that
very.
there's a lot underneath of that, uh,
Mm.
which really comes boiling up to the surface as the film progresses. But I thought
A little
this was a
too
real,
composed.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
very. Her life and her work is all very composed, for better or for worse.
Mm.
But
Literally.
you know the way that this film was marketed, you would think Lydia Tarr is a real person, but she isn't.
Yes.
I thought she
I
was real, but then I googled and they're like, no.
I think that was
No,
100% intentional.
oh,
I think they
absolutely,
tried to
but
pull a
it's
Fargo.
written so authentically that it's very believable, and
Hmm.
I think it's a fascinating character study in that regard because like this is like the state of kind of contemporary classical music, and what are the kind of people that are what kind of expectations are these people expected to hold
Hmm.
up when they're in these conservatories, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is very much the world that my grandpa is steeped into, or he really follows. And anytime they have those like Cineplex opera productions, he goes to them, um, like the remote kind of things. But
Mm.
yeah, and it's just really fascinating, kind of seeing this sort of look into it. And I wonder how this movie is received by people who are really into that stuff. Does it I imagine it feels pretty authentic to them as well. But I thought the way that her characterization was uh, put together was fantastic, and the way
Yes.
that they give that exposition dump right off the bat in the form of an interview where this person is just listing off all the accolades and awards and recognition that she's received, and
Hmm.
then she goes on to talk about it, and she's presenting her new book Tar on Tar or Rat on Rat, um, as her I love that little tidbit with her like secretary just like correcting it,
Or
just to
the
show like
secretary just rolling her eyes at
ju-
all the accomplishments, like really?
just like damn, tell me what you really feel.
Playing your ego a little bit,
But
really? Yeah.
I've heard people compare this film to There Will Be Blood, where it shows this like
A little bit.
person who
Yeah.
just brings on a lot of power, and there's an element of corruption there. It's a lot more subtle and in this film though, and it shows how yeah, just like how power affects and influences people, and how they'll kind of try to curate the world around them in their favor in some subtle ways. And I thought that was a fantastic character study in that regard.
Mhm. Yeah, I remember there was a segment in the Actors on Actors interview where they were talking about like women getting more roles in movies, and they said like one downside to that, unfortunately, was that women never really get to play unlikable characters because of the fear of offending people, and women never get to play characters like this. And they talked about Lydia Tarr, and they talked about how Evelyn can come across as kind of like selfish and flawed, and a lot of the different scenes in Every Never All at Once. And that's one aspect I do like about this movie, is that these character studies are typically like reserved for men, and if I'm not mistaken, I think this was originally meant for a male character as well.
Yeah.
No,
But
I think
changing the
Todd Field.
gender, just
Yeah.
like with Every Never All at Once,
Yeah.
drastically like changes the dynamic in a fascinating way. And at the very least, I do have some issues with how the film ends, but I am very glad we're getting films like this today. I'm very glad they aren't scared to have this kind of character reserved for a female role. Like, I think that is something we don't see enough of, and now I definitely want
Yeah.
more of it.
And, like, I don't mean to put any spoilers, but even at the end of the movie where she attacks Elliot, you
This is
see
my son!
she, like, you kind of see, like, a big feminine rage moment where she, like, charges at him and she's, like, ready to kill him, like, "This is my son!" And she just, like, pummels him to the ground, and there's just, like, men everywhere,
That
and
slap was
yeah.
one of the, that was on part, that felt very There Will Be Blood with Daniel Plainview just
Oh, yeah.
slapping.
I was like, "You go, girl!"
That felt like that hurt.
I've
I mean,
abandoned
also
my
no.
child. This is
Give the bullet was
I-
out of here.
so
"This is Sparta!"
being people who review films, we're also deep seated in meme culture, and I love these. There's all these problematic characters that guys bring up as literally me, people, and then when it's the equivalent for women, it's like the good for her, characters, and she'd probably be one of them, like these. But I like that we're getting more complex portrayals of
Yeah.
characters on both sides of the of the spectrum, because
100%.
being human's a complicated thing, and when you're trying to be ambitious and accomplish these things, and there's a point toward the end, and again, full spoilers ahead, but I like that after this conspiracy of her with a former um I forget the character's name, but Krista, like this woman that she apparently tried to have her give her like sexual favors. I
Tried
don't
to
know how.
or succeeded? I think it's up
I'm
in the
not sure.
air. Yeah.
The film really never like confirms that, but it
No, it
feels
doesn't.
like, but like but just with how much he's been trying to cover it up, definitely something went
Yeah.
terribly there.
Mhm.
And when she escapes everything to go home, and she's looking back at like kind of all the awards that she had growing up, you could tell that she was always a high accomplishing person from the get-go, and probably always had these like high expectations of her, and was always very ambitious, and that's kind of endearing to see. But you can see like she really went to the threshold of that, and it was also so there were so many subtle little things that I noticed that like upon rewatching it, that really stuck out to me. I love when she goes to the doctor after injuring herself and claims she was attacked. She even lies about that, which I find really amusing. But
Oh god, yeah. Like she has
wait,
to keep.
wait.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, it's like when the doctor looks at her, she says, or he says, you may need to get that adjusted. It's a bit crooked. I feel like that line is her entire character.
Yep. I
Like
also
you
like.
might have to
Yeah,
adjust
go
some
on.
things. You're a bit crooked.
I also love the aftermath where she's like, I got into a fight. It's alright. You should see the other guy. Like she has to do everything to obtain her power. Like that's what I mean by
To,
in some
to
ways she's kind of
maintain this
similar.
image.
Yeah,
She's maintaining this image that she's created for herself, right?
exactly. And
And
yeah, go on.
there's a segment where she's reading from her book, and she's talking about how music is this unknowable language, and she's using this very elevated language that's very pretentious in her writing. And then when she escapes to go home, and she's watching this old VHS tape of the composer saying the exact same thing, but in a much more grounded, simplified language, like she subconsciously ripped it off, because that was a great inspiration to her. But that's the one moment you actually see her kind of break down and cry, I think, where she's really
First time she feels
coming back.
genuine emotion. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like she's coming back to her roots, to what she really cares for in the music, and like her whole image and reputation has started to dissolve at that point. So I thought that was really touching to see, actually, just her kind of harkening back to
Yeah.
what she to what really inspired her in the first place, rather than maintaining this image she's built around herself.
Yeah, like she has to keep up. That's what I mean with the similarities to Salieri, where like they have everything. They're incredibly talented. They have people in their lives that love and respect them, but it's not enough for her. She needs more and more and more. Where she'll put other people down, and like one girl wasn't enough. We'll just ignore her. I'm gonna make another girl my next prize target. Like they're
Mhm.
it's like a rush. It's like an adrenaline rush of like I need more power. Like, but her successes weren't enough for her, and she didn't appreciate those enough, and that's kind of what leads to her downfall. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people like that, and the whole fact that she is a girl and she does kind of use the guise of like, oh well, I'm an openly lesbian person that goes to all these different cultures, and I'm open to all these different languages and experiences. Like I swear, like I'm such a nice and kind of woke person, but we see the way she argues with the student and
Oh,
argues with her wife at home. Like it is not genuine in the slightest. I kind of
mhm.
wonder, like, how genuine is her actual relationship? Is she with her just because she needs to keep up that good image, or is there something more genuine there? Like, what do you guys think with like her relationship with her actual, I don't know if it's a girlfriend or a wife. I think
It's
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 wife.
it's it's her wife. It's
That's
her
her
wife.
wife. Okay.
I think the wife, like her relationship with her concert master, um,
Yeah, there's that too. Like, is she just getting at her to get like the advantage of like being with a concert master, and like, oh, she could
yeah,
get me all these
like
big shows, she could do whatever I want.
it kind of screamed like nepotism at me because I was
100%.
like, why would you like, oh, like do like how do we know if if her wife was a concert master before being in a relationship with Lydia? Like,
Mhm.
what if she was just
Oh.
um a player and then she got into a relationship with Lydia and then became a concert master due to nepotism? It's I was like, that looks fishy.
Yeah, it kind of
I
might
there
go
was a
either way. Yeah.
conversation that she has with her. There was a conversation where she has with her where I think she first came to Berlin, and she kind of got in a relationship with her almost to like climb up the ranks in a sense. It was like to get her into the world a little bit. Like they kind of helped each other through it, and they had sort of this mutual agreement. And she was arguing against her that she was not being let in with what she's scheming
Yeah.
anymore. Like these are the rules. And I love that line where she where like Kate Blanchett says that, how dare you reduce our relationship to being transactional? And then she comes back and says, there's only one relationship you haven't treated as transactional, and it's this, young girl that we're taking care of.
Yeah.
Which, damn, like
Yeah, I know that really hit hard.
that no, that was a great line, just to really break hers down. Like she has treated everyone around here, like around her in the world that she's climbed up the ladder in, as a transactional relationship, which is wow.
Yeah,
Um,
and even the idea that like there's an implication like her wife knows about the stuff she did in the past, and she didn't care
mhm.
about that. What she cared about was affecting their image, and it gave me the impression that she's like just as nepotistic and worried about her image as much as Kate Blanchett is, to the point where she doesn't even completely neglects like this
Mhm.
awful sexual assault and affair that she's had in the past, just so long as it doesn't affect their family and their image. And there's a lot of moments
Yeah.
in the movie that made me feel like really uneasy, like the
Yeah.
fact that like she makes her student wear like a really nice dress when everyone else is in like standard uniform. She wears like a really nice white dress. I'm just
Mhm.
like, ah,
Or like they have
that's
those blind
nasty.
auditions. They have those blind auditions, and the whole idea is that you are just hearing how they play, you're not seeing them. But when she recognizes like the pair of shoes on the one person, that she that changes her
Yeah,
decision,
she blatantly
right?
cheats. Yeah,
Like she very blatantly does that. And can we go back and talk about that one shot of her in the class? Because man,
a
I
lot
thought
of
that
good
was
cinematography. Yeah,
it was like it was a solid 10-minute take, which isn't technically impressive in and of itself, but I like this whole argument discussion that she's having with the student about kind of his composition, and how he's not really into Beethoven because of the type of person he is, and he's using these very identity politic terms to describe him, and then her argument is, well, if you can reduce Mozart to that, then we can reduce you to that as well. Um,
Mm.
Oh
which I thought there was a good
man.
discussion to be had there. I do think that she was like really grilling him kind of unfairly a little bit, but I do think that she had a point there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I thought it was really just a fascinating discussion, and
Very well written.
I,
Yeah.
I I love how that gets all cut up and taken out of context after the fact in that little video.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, the
Like
phone
the
always
phone.
has a presence in the movie, and
yeah,
I feel like that was kind of
Yeah.
like a way of saying like there's no hiding in the modern world. Like you're out there for the
mm,
world to see, either you you like it or not. And of course, in this case, she has very obvious reasons not to like it. But I feel like in that scene, like a lot of people are like, "Oh, it's pro cancel culture." Oh no, it's anti cancel culture. I feel like that's missing
Mhm.
the point. I think the scene on a second watch is her projecting.
he is
You
projecting a lot
separate
for
the
sure.
art from the artist, focus on the music, not the artist behind it. And like
Yeah.
she's almost has this kind of fragile ego. Like she could let the conversation go. She could have worded it in a different way, but she sees this
Mhm.
there's several scenes where she sees conversations like that as an attack on her ego. Like the scene when the sound guys give a very genuine complaint, like, "Hey, like the people in the back aren't playing loud enough. Could they boost up their instruments?" And she immediately, with her assistant and her wife, just like, "No, that was perfect. You don't need to change anything." And she sees this as an attack and as an excuse to get rid of probably the saddest scene in the movie. Get rid of like the I forget his name, the lead artist. That of course part of the reason is because she's
Oh
also getting
yeah,
back at her
and
assistant. But the
did,
fact
did
that
you
like
did you
such
notice?
simple
I
comments
just want to point
break
out
her
one
down.
thing, but did
Yeah.
you notice she lifts like something off of his desk right before she tells him that we're gonna switch you out?
What did
I'm
she
not even
lift?
sure. I'm not even sure it was, but it almost looks like an EpiPen. Like
No,
she
it
like
was the
put it.
pen because she hates it when he clicks the pen, and
Oh,
she
okay.
grabbed the pen to get her to stop because she's very we didn't mention it very sensitive to noise, which
Mm.
that was unfortunately one part I related to. Like I'd sleep in the middle of the night and I swear I'd hear like a weird noise in the background. I'd be like, "What the fuck is that?" And
But it's
then
like she steals something off his desk, puts it in
yeah,
her back pocket. She tells him that we're gonna switch you out, basically, or just think about it for a minute. But he calls her out on her bullshit for a second.
yeah,
But
and you can
then
see
when
her
she
almost snap.
but
It's
then
like
when
really scary.
she bites back, he immediately backpedals because she does have that position of power over him still. But I
Unfortunately, yeah.
damn.
Yeah, it's such a heartbreaking scene. I really like that character too. So mom and I were both
Mm.
like disappointed, like, "Oh." And again, it's for like such a genuine comment, but she can't take any attack on her ego, even if it's like very
Any
genuine
criticism.
criticism, none
Oh yeah.
whatsoever. And even like when the tenants later on in the movie are just knock her door and be like, "Hey, listen," like very reasonable, like, "Listen, can you tell us like the hours you're conducting music because like we just don't want to scare off any new neighbors." Like they got a job to do, they've got to find people to fill in the spot in the apartment. But she's just goes like, "Fuck you! I'm playing this harmonica. I'm just gonna scream apartment for sale
Accordion.
like a
Yeah.
total child." Like, and again, she did play the accordion as a child, so she's literally regressing to acting like a child. And I've met people
Yeah.
like that where it's like any obviously this is like a little exaggerated, but any attack on her ego, even if it really doesn't matter or change who you are or what you do, is just not allowed. Like there's people like Lydia Tarr out there, and it's very, very, very unsettling to think about. Ugh. Just ugh. And like even
Yeah.
the scene like from a second time where she's like going, talking down to the bully. Like the first time you're like, "Ah, that's kind of cute. She's stepping up for her daughter," but the second time I'm just like, "Oh, she's gonna murder that kid. She's gonna fucking murder that kid. Like get out of
Yeah.
here, kid." Like I feel so scared for her.
Yeah, there was another thing in that whole back and forth with her in the apartment as she's working on stuff. She'll hear like that chime bell go off, and she wasn't able to place it at first. But I like how she starts to play that on the piano at first, and
Annoying
then she
ringtone.
starts. Yeah, but then she starts to interpret that musically, and I like how in the next scene she's like the one trumpet should be far away, and it's almost like her taking this element from her environment and interpreting that musically, which I love seeing that. That's very much like the musical creative process. To again, you're sampling things that happen to you in real life, and you're taking that, but then you find out what that chime bell was later on, and it's this older woman that is in need of urgent care, and
Mhm.
she's like so disgusted when she has to like help her like up in the chair like with the one woman. She's like immediately revolt like yeah, just grossed out by it. She starts to like wash herself immediately afterwards, which I thought that was
Mhm.
really interesting, that whole exchange. And then yeah, the apartment for sale afterwards. And
Apartment for
I,
sale.
and if you look, that shot is ever so slightly crooked. Like it's so subtle. It's like the most subtle Dutch angle I've ever seen, where you may not even notice that the camera is slightly, it's not level, but it is just ever so slightly off.
Damn.
Oh man.
Yeah, I'm gonna. I
Do,
have
do, you
to
have, do you have
say,
any final thoughts on that, Julia, or is there anything that we've missed that you wanted to talk about?
yeah, go ahead.
No, no. I did want to say that going back to that conversation between her and the student
Hmm.
when they were talking about Beethoven, after she's grilling him and he slams the piano closed, stands up and goes, "You're a fucking bitch." And she goes, "And you're a robot."
I
Like
will.
she can't take she has an answer for everything.
Yep,
She can't
Yes.
take criticism.
that's true. And
And
also the irony of like calling people like that robots is like, do you even know what a robot is? Like a robot
Mhm.
isn't emotional. Like if we're going for like the standard kind of woke stereotype where it's like they're overly emotional, they overreact to everything. A robot isn't that. Like it just shows that
Yeah.
she has a lot of these flowery words, but when you put them together, they don't really seem that
Yeah.
intelligent. They
It's like
just sound
her.
intelligent.
It's
Like
her
I think he was
dismissive, like.
actually a robot.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
it's like that. That's her dismissive point for all these like millennials, basically. But she did have a point there in that scene a little bit. It's like the
Mhm.
architecture of your soul unfortunately, seems to be social media,
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
some
which
great like
you
insults
know
and
I
Which
uh
is stupid.
I normally push back against boomers talking about that, but she had a point there, unfortunately.
yeah, I know. Like it's one of those things where it's like if you just change the direction of the conversation
Yeah.
slightly, like that's what I mean. Where it's like if she didn't let her ego get in the way, it could have been an interesting discussion, but she can never sacrifice that, and that's kind of what
Yeah.
leads.
Oh
I
yeah.
feel like I don't know if I agree that she should have had a downfall the way she did. And here's my kind of point on that. Like, I feel like she should have had a downfall, but the impression I got with like the wife bringing up the previous incident is that, like, and the point of the movie, I feel like up until that point was no matter how awful she is, no matter how much she abuses people, it's always going to be brushed under the rug. It's always going to be like pushed aside. She's always going to hold on to her position of power. And I feel like that's what the film was going for. And to kind of have her have a comeuppance was, I still feel like it was pretty cheesy, like and kind of like Hollywoodized. Like, yeah, don't worry, this unlikable character is getting a comeuppance, and that's fine. But I don't know if the final sequence worked. And I'm gonna also mention that the final composition she does is for a little game called Monster Hunter. Very famous Japanese game series. First time I watched it, the implication of that scene is that like she's kind of fallen down, like she's gotten to the point where she's making this composition for nerds, and the implication I thought at the time when I first watched it was that like make composing music for video games is like a low point. I'm just like, as a fan of video games, I don't really know if I agree with that. But on a second watch, I don't know if it's the film saying that. I think it's Lydia saying that because the film
Yeah.
feels like Lydia trying to convince the audience to her point of view, but we can see through the cracks. So on the second watch, I feel like that's more of what it's going for. But I don't know, the climax kind of lost steam for me, and I don't feel like the pacing's evenly balanced. Like I thought certain scenes were too long, but I also thought certain scenes were way too short and could have been maybe fleshed out more to kind of like let that slow burn tension grow, but it never quite gets to the point where it nails it to me. Like I feel like it kind of lost steam towards the end, but for better or for worse, this is a film people are going to talk about for years. And like you said, like the music, the visuals, and of course the mind blowing career best performance from a an array of career best performances from Kate Blanchett. Like it's the build up until that climax is so good that I can let my personal gripes aside. But what do you guys feel about the climax? So I ask you, Julia.
I think the climax was I think it was interesting to say the least, because I mean, I wouldn't expect like a Monster Hunter cameo
Nobody
at the
did.
end.
There were people in the theater laughing when I first saw it.
I didn't know if that was a
I
legit
wouldn't
thing,
even-
that if they were just I knew that they were having a riff on the whole like cosplay fantasy thing. I didn't realize that that was a real like
Yep,
I didn't
no,
realize that was
that
yeah.
is Monster
Yeah.
Hunter.
I need to look into Monster Hunter.
I recognize
Like, I
that
went into
image of the
Discord at
flag.
the end of the,
Yeah.
I went into Discord at the end to tell my friends that I was like, oh, I know you guys like Monster Hunter. You should watch Tar. And they're like, what do those things? What do those two things have to do with each other?
Just
and I was
trust
like,
me.
"You'll see."
Just wait till literally the last 2 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
I think I forget exactly what they said, but the narrator's voice at the end was like, "If you are about to lose your footing, leave." And I was like, that oddly plays nicely with the movie.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
mean. Like, is this just Lydia's perspective on like, oh, look at these nerds. You know, they don't understand my greatness. I hate composing for other people, and like that's probably more of what it's going for. But yeah,
I
like,
think the film is very just neutral about presenting it, and
Mhm.
we're just sort of seeing the kind of the aftermath. But there was a joke that I saw someone make where, um, it's like the worst consequence that a white woman will face when after a career downfall is having to work with Asian people, something like that, which is just like wow, Jesus Christ.
fucking roasted. I
But it's
did
like
like, however,
she
yeah, sorry,
she just narrowly escapes the whole controversy by just leaving the country.
Yeah.
yeah,
But then there's a scene before that I remember where she was going to sign up for a massage, and then she realizes that
yeah,
this is more than a massage parlor, and eeh.
that was
I did
crazy.
find
Yeah.
it, but it's almost like isn't her disgust a little hypocritical though if what she's accused of is true?
Yeah, no, I think what she was disgusted of is that the girl reminded her, because here's the thing, they're sitting like an orchestra, and the girls she's focusing on was sitting in the same position that the girl she was flirting with in America was sitting in. I think
Mhm.
she's throwing up because she reminds him of her, and she is repulsed by the decisions she's made in the past. Like she feels
By
some
her own
kind of
actions,
guilt.
yeah.
I think that's what that was representing.
That makes
Yeah, like
sense.
she's reminded of like her past traumas and mistakes. But you know, obviously it's too little, too late, which I think the film was definitely going for. Can't hide from the
Mhm.
past. It's always gonna catch
I
up.
moved to the Philippines.
Yes.
Exactly. What are you guys gonna rate it?
Oh man.
I'd say 8.5 out of 10.
Nice.
Nice. Nice. What about you, Devin?
I was gonna give it just a solid 8, but I think I could bump it up to a 9. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
damn. I just thought, yeah, it's a solid film, and I think it held up even better on the second watch.
It does
When I
hold
got
a
to it.
little better on a second watch. I'm wondering if maybe even more watches on the future will make me like it more. There's a
I
lot
just
to
feel so
chew on. Yeah.
I feel so bad for Todd though, because like this film did not have the staying power that Everything Everywhere did
Yeah,
this
he
year.
didn't have a chance.
Did you see the way he was looking at the other director when he got called up?
Yeah.
He was
Oh
like giving
man.
the mad side eye. He's like, mm-hmm.
And before
Yeah.
that, he had this like big hat on, and I swear there was a shot where like he has his brim down and he's trying to avoid being seen by the camera. Like I think he knew early on that he was going to be absolutely
He
annihilated.
was clearly nervous too. Like he
Yeah.
just was so
That
nervous
like,
to be here. Yeah.
God damn it, this is supposed to be my year.
Yeah, god damn it. Yeah, why are these two
This is my
25
song!
why are these 25-year-olds making dildo jokes get to take the Oscar? But Tar, I'm struggling between a 7.5 and an 8. I'll give it a very reluctant 8 out of 10. Like I really didn't vibe with the climax, but man, the build up to it is just so disturbing, purposely cold in an engaging way, and just a fascinating character study and quite possibly one of the best female performances in recent memory. Like if
Yeah.
Michelle Yeoh didn't win the Best Actress Oscar, this would have been the only acceptable choice by a large margin.
Mhm.
Yeah, that wraps everything up. Thank you so much, Julia, for coming by.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah,
Yeah, thanks for
it's
being here.
been a long time coming, but I think this was a very good discussion. Had a lot of fun. Thomas and Claire, if you're listening, shout out to you guys for stopping by. You were great. Thank you for the insights, in particular, Thomas. What's coming up next for Thursdays with Moire, Devin?
Oh God, I have to look this up. So we had a poll recently because every so often we like to do voter polls. We like to open the floor up, and every time this happens, democracy fails so hard. Um,
Yeah. Oh, right.
but
We got, I got it right here. Real life or fantasy? We'll be talking about Nicole Kidman's The Others, which I actually haven't seen yet, The Sixth Sense, and Shutter Island. Some interesting films to talk about. That is 2 weeks closer to the end of March. If you're listening, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Thursdays with Maury. And is it Thursday, Tuesday, Saturday yet? Who gives a shit? What day is it? Who knows? Everybody say goodbye. Have a good night.
All
Stay
right.
tuned for
I'll be
Conan.
back again.
See you.